Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm a body language expert and an anthropologist, and this is where we learn to listen to what our bodies are trying to tell us. In order to do that, I need to ask you to take a moment to think about a time when you were separated from someone you loved. For me, it was when my husband and I were visiting his grandmother in a nursing home, and they decided to put her in hospice care. We drove her over an hour away from her house in order to get to the hospice, and then we said goodbye to her. I remember standing there holding his hand and kissing her forehead as she looked at me and whispered, "Don't forget about me." That is an incredibly painful thing to hear as you walk away from someone who is dying. If you've ever had that experience, maybe you know what a gut punch it is to say, "I unforget about you," when you know you will forget some of the details of her face and her mannerisms and the sound of her voice. Even if you try not to, your brain just doesn't hold on to everything. So that brings up all sorts of grief about how fragile life is, about how precious time is. It brings up our mortality. It reminds us that none of us knows how much time we have left with anyone. It makes us reflect on all the times we've been ungrateful for the time we've had. And as I stood there thinking about my grandmother-in-law and saying goodbye to her, I also remembered other goodbyes that I've had to say to people in my life, and I wondered if you could also remember someone that you had to say goodbye to. But instead of being a natural goodbye, it was because of something horrible that happened, like the death of someone close to you, or a disaster, or being torn apart from your family through no choice of your own. For instance, I thought about someone that I worked with who was born in a country that was torn by civil war. He didn't want to go to one side or the other, but he had to flee the country in the middle of the night with just the clothes on his back, leaving behind his wife and children. When he told me that story, I could see how devastated he was. Even though he was talking about something that had happened 40 years prior. He had just turned 18 at the time, and he still cried when he talked about his youngest son. He had to leave him behind because there was no way that he could carry him and get him out of that situation. When he was sharing that with me, he was crying as he told me those stories. I asked him if he had any memories that popped into his head when he thinks about his son. Anything that he sees or feels or tastes or smells or hears that takes him back to that time. And he said, "The garlic that they grew in their garden." He said, "Even today, if I smell garlic, I think of my son and how happy he was picking the garlic and taking it out of the soil and showing it to me." I could see that that memory made him sad, but it also made him smile, because it was such a beautiful memory of his son. And it sounds like such a simple thing, like, "Oh, I remember the garlic." But that's the kind of thing that a child would share with his father. It's such a precious thing. He told me that he has 2 daughters now, and he has a great life. But every once in a while, when he smells garlic, he remembers his son, and he cries. And then he said something that really struck me. He said, "Sometimes I wonder if he remembers me." He's wondering if his son, who's probably in his 30s now, if he thinks about him, if he wonders where he is, if he wonders if he'll ever find him again. That's such a beautiful question, and it brought up so many feelings of empathy for this man, for the choices that he had to make, for the pain of being ripped away from his family, for the hope that he must have felt when he was carrying that baby, and then being unable to do that anymore. It occurred to me that if he developed any kind of PTSD from that event, it would be something called somatic experiencing, or somatic post-traumatic stress disorder. Somatic means body in Latin, and somatic experiencing is when you feel the stress of that event in your body, even if you don't consciously remember having that experience. You might feel it as anxiety or depression or digestive problems or muscle tension, fatigue, insomnia, chronic pain, or even autoimmune disorders. So the reason that I thought of this is because people can develop Lyme after being separated from someone they love or after going through a traumatic experience. The word Lyme actually means to be separated or isolated. So it's easy to understand why someone would develop Lyme after being ripped away from their family. There's an organization for survivors of genocide who have developed chronic health conditions due to the trauma of that experience. They call it disease of exile. And the mission of the organization is to raise awareness of the relationship between genocide and chronic illness and to advocate for medical providers to recognize that as a legitimate cause of these illnesses. I've heard similar stories from people who have survived famines and war. They develop symptoms of Lyme after the experience. Interestingly, the healing process often starts when they confront the trauma directly, either by telling the story to someone they trust or by creating a ritual around remembering the experience. One woman I read about in an article in the New York Times buried a time capsule filled with photos and stories and memories of her family members who died in the genocide, and then buried it in her backyard. She said that she wasn't ready to let them go yet, but she wanted to be able to move forward in her life and not live in fear of the past. And she said that burying the time capsule helped her do that. She finally felt like she could move forward. And I thought of my friend who had to say goodbye to his son and leave him behind in that war-torn country. Maybe he needs to plant a tree in his yard and name it after his son and water it every week and watch it grow. Or maybe he needs to write down all the memories that he has of his son and put them in a box and lock that box and put somewhere safe so that he knows that those memories are being held and cared for. What I've learned from listening to the stories of people who have experienced war and genocide and famine is that the body will hold on to the pain of being separated from someone you love. And sometimes it will manifest as a physical illness. Sometimes you can heal from that by confronting the trauma directly. And sometimes you can help the healing process along by creating a ceremony or a ritual around the goodbye. Maybe you're watching this video and you haven't gone through a traumatic experience like that, but you still feel the pain of being separated from someone you love. Maybe you recently went through a divorce, or lost a parent, or had a falling out with a sibling or a friend. My heart goes out to you. If you feel that pain, that longing to be whole again, know that that is completely normal. Know that that pain will eventually pass and you will feel whole again. It might take some time, and you might need to confront the trauma of that goodbye, but you will get there. I remember the first year after my dad died, my mom would call me up and say, "Do you remember when this happened? Or do you remember when he did this?" And I remember thinking, why is she calling me up and reminding me of these memories? It hurts too much. But looking back on it now, I realized that she was trying to keep his memory alive. She was trying to keep his spirit alive. She was trying to remind me that even though he was gone, he had lived a beautiful life and he had loved us very much. So, if you're feeling the pain of a difficult goodbye, please allow yourself to grieve. Allow yourself to cry. Allow yourself to be mad or confused or scared or frustrated. And then, when you're ready, figure out what you can do to honor the memory of that person or that time. Maybe you can create a ritual or a ceremony or just a quiet moment where you reflect on who they were and how they touched your life and how you will carry that love and those memories with you for the rest of your life. I hope that this helps you a little bit, and I hope that you follow along for more compassionate insights into the stories that your body is trying to tell you. See you next time.